So you might be very interested, as we were when we did this research, into what are customers willing to pay for a solution like this. And so we looked at this from two different perspectives. The first one is that if a customer had to pay a lump sum before they left the dealership, how much would they be willing to pay? And you see here, the numbers are pretty promising. We get a good average from about 400 to 700. There's some willingness to pay in there. Some of the lower ranges, we had 200 to 300 people are willing to pay, but perhaps not realistic for a solution like this. And so our conclusion here was when we looked at the demographics that backed this up, so how much income are people making who are answering these questions, what we found is that about half the people who make $75K a year or more are willing to pay in that 400 to 700 range. Obviously, this is going to depend on the value of the car. And so that's why we believe that the dealer always has to have some flexibility to set their own price for a solution like this to match their customer base. But we got a little bit of a different result if we looked at what happens if it's financed as part of a loan or lease. If you were to amortize this over the course of, let's say, a 3-year loan, what ended up happening was customers were willing to pay more, because when you put it to them as the perceived value of how much they could make per month, then that value was a lot higher. So the higher income levels that we looked at in this case, 63% of them were willing to pay $15 to $25 a month, and that amortizes out over 3 years to more than $600. So that was very promising to look at in this light as well as part of the financing. Then let's go back to the question of a couple different incentives, like for instance, what if there was a limited warranty associated with a car not being recovered when using the solution, and we gave them a $5,000 lump sum or $1,000 to pay off their deductible if the car wasn't recovered. You can see that really increases the willingness to buy, and that becomes an important part of a theft recovery solution, is what happens if the theft recovery solution doesn't perform the way it's supposed to. So consumers said, okay, I'll be a lot more comfortable purchasing something like this if there are limited warranties, and that would really help close the deal. And then the other question, of course, was, as we know, the insurance industry, in many cases, is being kind enough to offer discounts to consumers who are using the primary and or secondary tracking devices in their cars. And you see here as well, it is a very good driver towards closing a sale if such an offer is made to the customer. But we were also curious to know, okay, what are consumer expectations about those insurance discounts? And you can see here that consumers don't have unreasonable expectations. There are very few people that said at least 15%. Almost all of them were in a lower range, about 5 to 10%, you can see. And so based on our research on what insurance companies are willing to offer in these cases, consumer expectations about those discounts are very reasonable. So that sort of concludes the research that we've looked at, and I just want to summarize it for you in a bit of a nutshell. 30% of consumers surveyed have experienced car theft, and 31.8% of you. Consumers are concerned about car theft, and that concern is really only on the rise at this point. The good news is consumers are really prioritizing basic theft recovery features, and their expectations are extremely reasonable about the feature set. They're willing to pay for them, especially if paying for it is over time, amortized. Ancillary services like warranties and insurance will increase sales. So that's sort of the summary and what we took into our understanding of how to develop a product around both consumer expectations as well as some of your expectations.